All right, thank you, Jill. Hello, for those who don't know me, my name is Chandler Sharp. So I am a GFP alum, graduated in 2019. And so I will introduce our speaker for this evening, so Mr. Cree Walls. So Cree Walls currently serves as program coordinator for the Forest Preserves of Cook County, Illinois. His background includes studying improv- improvisational comedy at Chicago's Second City. Throughout his career, Cree has made several TV and radio spots promoting service learning and youth development. He earned a BA from DePaul University in nonprofit management. He is an AIP alum, Advanced Career Program, who earned an MA in biology and affiliation with the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago, and is also a proud graduate of the 2019 Latino Policy Forum, a Multicultural Leadership Academy, which promotes Black and Brown relationship building. Cree has worked with the Jane Goodall Institute and the Garfield Park Conservatory, managing various youth programs locally and nationally. He has developed professional and personal development training workshops to more than 3,000 youth nationally. Cree has also chosen was also chosen as a member of the 2020 University of Chicago Civic Actors Studio and was selected as a 2021 Shift Emerging Leader. So quite a spread there. So with that, I will give the screen and floor to Cree.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So what I'm going to do is to share my slide and speak from that first slide, and then we'll go from here. We'll go from there. Everywhere we go from. All right. Give me 1 second. So throughout this talk, my name is Credell Walls, but I prefer to go by Cree. So if you put my name in the chat box, I would prefer you say, "Hey, Cree, I have this question," but I most likely won't be the one reading that chat. So I'm going to ask my fellow chat masters to field questions for me. My preference throughout this presentation is to answer those questions at the end. However, I am open to stopping midway to answer a question if need be. So the title of this presentation is How Connecting Youth to Nature Saved My Life. I want to point out that when I talk about how connecting youth to nature saved my life, I'm going to be talking more about how, because I was working with youth in the different jobs that I've had, opened up my eyes to ways that I can do things differently. So with that being said, we talked about the fact that I work with the Forest Preserve of Cook County, and I've been there for 8 years, and my job title is program coordinator. So what I do with my job is so for those of you that don't know, the Forest Preserve of Cook County is in Chicago, Illinois. We have over 70,000 acres of land spread out with numbers and different types of amenities, from 6 nature centers, 5 campgrounds. You have opportunities to go canoeing, hiking, fishing, bird watching, any and everything that any resident of Cook County and outside of Cook County can participate in. And my job is to try to connect people to these different amenities. And my job I'm actually focusing more on groups that are underrepresented, the population of people that don't typically visit the forest preserve and utilize what we have. Give me 1 second. So in addition to doing that, I do a lot of community engagement with tabling different events. Anytime there might be some type of speaking engagements, I'm one of the people that the Forest Preserve asks to go out and do these things. And with my job with the Forest Preserve, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy being out in nature. But the highlight of my job, outside of talking to different people, is working with youth. We have a program called Youth Outdoor Ambassadors. It's been around for 8 years. And these young people, the program recruits young people between the ages of 16 to 24. And we place them at our nature centers, and we place them with different zone teams where they learn how to, they learn what it means to be junior naturalists. They learn what it means to develop a connection to plants. And some of these young people that come into the program, a small percentage of them have that connection to the environment already. They're in school taking environmental courses. And then there's the other portion of the group that knows nothing about plants, and they only joined the program because they wanted a job. But it's part of my job and my team's job to help develop and foster that connection to the outdoors and to nature. And I can honestly say that I'm 47 years old, and at this point in my life, I never ever thought that I would be saying that I'm in the conservation field, that I am an environmentalist. And I never thought that I would say that I love working with teens. I never thought that I would say that if I wasn't working with youth in the outdoors, that I would have just been lost. And so you can put me on record, and I'm being recorded saying that, that without working with these amazing young people, I would have no idea. I wouldn't know where I would be today. But to understand that reason, you have to understand where I came from. You have to understand my background. And the other thing too is that I am someone that now has a background in theater, love doing improv, love doing sketch comedy. And that too is attributed to working with young people, because they make me want to be silly. They make me want to be out there in front of people. And some of the adults at my job at the Forest Observer will know that when they see me, I'm usually reserved. I'm usually quiet. I stay to myself. But when I'm around young people, that's when I put on my silly hat and I do my happy dance. And so that's where my passion is. But how did I get to this point? And how do I turn my slide? So I am a Chicago native. And by the way, I can't really see my chat box. So again, if there is a question that I need to stop, I'll ask for help. I'm from the South Side of Chicago, and I grew up in what used to be the world's largest public housing complex in the US, Robert Taylor Homes. And when I say the world's largest, it's because it extended from 39th and State Street all the way to 55th and State. So that's about a couple of miles. All the buildings, there were 16 floors, 10 units on each floors, and they were all 3-bedroom apartments. And my family, at that time, when we stayed there, from when I was 2 years old until 19, there were 5 of us. And no, I take that back. There were 6 of us. 6 of us. Also, my mom and my father and my uncle living in this 3-bedroom apartment. Neither one of my parents had jobs. We were on welfare, so that meant that we were really poor. We were really struggling financially. Now, what I want to make clear before I continue on is that although Robert Taylor is this huge stretch of property, and despite what people might say about public housing, Robert Taylor, in my opinion, is like other neighborhoods. You have that component of the housing complex that's really great, that's taken care of. And then you have that component of the housing complex that is neglected, kind of like the city of Chicago. You have different sides of that housing complex that were cared for, and other parts that were ignored. I lived in the portion that was ignored. If there was a moment when we would go outside, there's a large field that everything happened. One part of the field where it was part concrete, part grass, you had people playing football. Then you had another part of the field, that's where all your gangbangers hang out at. And then you had another part of the field where you had your park. I spent the bulk of my time on my porch writing raps, wrote raps about what I saw, what I heard, things that I was experiencing, things that I was feeling. And one of the main things that I was feeling is that I wasn't too excited about going outside. I wasn't excited about going downstairs because I didn't like what was going down downstairs. So throughout my life until I hit maybe 16, 17 years old, 3 moments in my life, I could have died by gunpoint. And all 3 instances made me ask myself a question of is it really safe to be outdoors? Why do I feel trapped where I'm at? How do I even get out of I felt hopeless. I didn't know what I was going to do next. And I shared earlier today, and I didn't think I was going to share in this story, and then I'll get past this point quickly, is that there was a point in all of this. I had learned how to get out of this box, per se. I had developed, and I found out a way how to get out of my neighborhood, how to travel to another part of Chicago, which encouraged me to learn more about myself and that I do have control over my life. But getting back to the part about those, the third time when I had a gun pulled out on me, I had decided that this type of thing didn't happen to me every day. So I need not to. When that happened to me, I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to go to school. I told nobody about what was going on and how terrified and afraid I was. But it took me to learn that I needed to get out of that situation. I needed to continue to go outside, and I needed to continue to be around different people. So years passed, a few more years passed as I was about to graduate from high school, which I was really excited about. Graduating on time, not really knowing what my next step was. I met some people putting together a community garden outside of Robert Taylor. And I was like, wow, these people putting together this garden seems to be really interesting and cool. I wonder if I can go over there and volunteer with them. Because again, after graduating from high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I did immediately go to a college, a Northwestern Business College, but that didn't pan out. Didn't know anything about financial aid, had no support, and I eventually dropped out. But I started working in a community garden, and at that time, the community garden had a bunch of white people in it. They were from Evanston, Hyde Park, different parts of Chicago that, of course, I had never ventured to, and they allowed me to put together a community garden, and it was the first time I've ever learned what basil was, because as far as I was concerned, basil looked like lettuce to me at that age, and they would ask me when I would come over there and work with them, they would ask me to watch the kids, watch the little children. At that point, at that age, I hated kids. I hated children, did not want to be around them. They get on my nerves. And I watched them, but I didn't want to. So I was always upset when they say, why don't you go help the kids planting their garden over there? I'm like, I don't want to do it. But I did it. And during that process, I also learned that it wasn't that bad of an experience. Now, it wasn't until a year later, I did a program called Public Allies Chicago. One of the guys I worked with, his name is Jamie Calvin. When I was doing the community garden work, he had someone from Public Allies placed with his organization at the time, which doesn't exist, so I'm not going to mention the name. She said, Cree, the kind of person that you are and how you work with these youth, you're natural. And I think that Public Allies Chicago would be a good program for you. It's an AmeriCorps program, and they help connect people to nonprofits, and you would have an opportunity to work with youth. And I'm like, but I don't want to work with kids. I really don't. I said, but I think this will be good for you. And so I applied. This woman named Michelle Obama, who was the founding executive director of Public Allies Chicago, she interviewed me along with 2 other people to get into the program. And And I was like, yeah, and Michelle seems really cool. And I was really disheartened when I heard her do a presentation before my program year started. And she says, all right, thank you all for coming. I'm not going to be here next year. I'm taking a job at University of Chicago. And I was like, oh, went up to her afterwards and said, Michelle, I was really looking forward to working under you. Um, I'm really new to all of this. I'm just a kid from the projects. And she said, Korea, I have an open door policy, so you can come over to University of Chicago anytime. I said, okay, great. So I did public allies. I was a natural with the young people. And I was still debating whether youth was anything that I was interested in working with. And then a woman, a friend of Michelle, gave a presentation to the group, and she says, if there was, she, in her presentation, I walked away with this one line that changed my life. She said, if there was ever something in your life that frustrates you and you struggle with it, maybe that's your calling. Maybe that's something you should be focusing on. So I thought about it for a while. I'm like, man, I wonder what that is. What frustrates the hell out of me? Oh, kids, youth. I can't stand them. They get on my nerves. But why, Cree? Why do they frustrate you so much? And I thought about it and I reflected on it. Kids are always around me. They're like, they're always standing in my blind spot. And what I at, it really wasn't them. It was me. I didn't like myself as a, I, I wasn't in a happy place in my life. I didn't like myself as a child, as a kid. And I was annoyed with other people my age at the time. So I went through a process of focusing and checking in on my emotions. And it wasn't until, and after that, right before I started working at Garfield Park Conservatory, no, actually, after Public Allies, someone who used to work at Public Allies took a job at Garfield Park Conservatory, and they said, Creed, man, we heard about you working at the community gardens, and you're working with young people. We have these youth over here, and we really think that you would be good with them. I was like, but I don't know anything about plants. They all look the same to me. When I walked around Garfield Park Conservatory, which is on the west side of Chicago, used to be the third largest conservatory in the US. I would walk around in that building. I would walk through that whole building in 20 minutes. And I told them, I said, yeah, so I didn't know anything about the plants. And they said, well, we'll give you the job if you learn about the plants and you have to go back to school. I said, great, I'll do it. So for the whole year, I was given tours of the tropical and desert plant collection, learned a great deal about tropical and desert plants I never thought that I would learn. I started to develop a passion for being around nature and being around these plants. And then I was working with some high school age students as an assistant. And the person who was leading the program wasn't doing the best job. And the youth were telling me that. And then he got fired. And then they asked me if I wanted to take his job. And I said, no. And I didn't tell him why, because I still hadn't embraced that I should be working with youth. And so I went on vacation, went to New Mexico. A friend was out there. She worked with young people that were in trouble with the law. And and I think it was maybe the third or the fourth week of me working with these students, this 6'3" big white kid says to me, and this is after we're doing a lot of bonding. They were really attached to me. And that didn't make the staff there happy because the kids aren't attached to them as they were to me. And then the kid says to me, Cree, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because I'm still young at the time. I said, I don't know, man. I want to be a teacher, but I don't think anybody will listen to me. I don't think students will listen to me. And he said with the sincerest words. He said, I'll listen to you. I would. And after he said that to me, I went back to Chicago, told the director, I'll take the job. I'll do it. I'll work with youth. I think I have what it takes. And that was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Because at that point, I had realized what my calling was. I had realized that I could actually make a difference in some young people's lives. And so I did the program. The docent program was a 2-year program where we had to teach them how to talk about the plant collection at not the nature center. That's my current job. They had to talk about these plants to the general public that came through. And at the end of that 2-year program, the kids said to the students said to me, they was like, "Cree, man, we're juniors now, and we're still in high school, and this is the 2-year program. What are we gonna do next year?" I was like, "You know what? This is the 2-year program. We didn't think that far." And one kid says, "Well, why don't we form an alumni committee? Because, we really like coming here." And so what I didn't say is that the Garfield Park Conservatory is in the middle of a community that's 99% African American. At that time in that year, it was not the safest neighborhood. And so Garfield Park Conservatory was seen as a safe haven. To get away from what was going on in their schools, they came to the Garfield Park Conservatory. And when we talked in our meetings and in our class sessions, we talked about everything from suicide to who had a gun, who didn't have a gun, to not being forced to go to church when they didn't want to go. So we had a strong level of comfort in that group. So going back to the story of them saying, "We really like coming here. We don't want to stop coming." And someone said, can we start an alumni committee so that we all can come together once a month or something? And I said, okay, that's a good idea. And another kid says, why don't we see the plants in their natural habitat? Like go out of the country. So we all started laughing. And I'm like, man, come on. Garfield Park Conservatory has never taken anyone out of the country. And what makes you think that's going to happen now? And then they say, yeah, you're right. And then it dawned on me, Cree, now would be the best time to teach these young people that if you really put your mind and heart to something, you can accomplish it. And I said, you know what? Give me a couple of days. Let me talk to a few people about this idea. So I talked to the director who's in the photo, who used to be there. I talked to her and she said, you know what? That might be a good idea, taking these young people from the west side of Chicago out of the country. And then I talked to the senior botanist on staff there. I said, what do you think about this idea? And he says, well, yeah, I think it would be an interesting idea. Maybe Peru. Peru has the widest varieties of tropical plants. That would be amazing. I have someone who could potentially help take you all there. And then I said, you know what? We're going to do this. We are going to do this. To shorten this version of this story, in the span of 5 to 6 months, we raised $30,000 to take, the goal was 10 youth, but 4 of them dropped out for numbers of reasons. I didn't want to take the vaccine because of my religion. I'm pregnant, so I can't go. And one person said, I'm scared to go. And another person said, well, my friend isn't going, so I'm not going. And at that point, I also kind of lost faith into taking a trip. But Ronnie, who's actually on this call, him and his other friend, they said, Cree, man, we can't back out now. We've worked really hard to make this trip happen. People are now contributing money. We got to do this. We got to go. And we took six young people from the west side of Chicago, all expense paid trip, to Peru to see these plants in their natural habitat for 10 days. It was amazing and wonderful experience. Out after going to Peru, I've traveled to different parts of the world. And Peru is still my favorite adventure because of the experience of watching these young people that never left their neighborhood and never had a passport. And I had never had a passport. All of us got our passports at the same time to go to Peru. And we titled this story the blind leading the blind because I was leading them to this Peruvian country where we did a lot of things. We learned a lot about the plants. We interacted with the schools that were out there. We played soccer against them. We lost. And then we played basketball against the group. Of course, we dominated because we were much taller. But how far will you go to inspire others? That's what I walked away learning from that experience with the Garfield Park Conservatory. Is that just because somebody might tell you no, and someone did tell us, there was someone at the conservatory that was like, you know what, I know you guys want to do this trip. However, we don't have the capacity to raise this money. So Cree, is on you to raise this money. What would you do if you can't get the money? And quite honestly, I couldn't even think about not getting the money because I just knew that we were going to get this money and people wanted to see this happen. And actually, one of the parents, when we got back from Peru, one of the parents, they said to us, you know what, Cree, we're really upset with you. It's like, what? Why is that? Because you just said that you guys are going to do this presentation to everyone about your experience, and you never once thought to ask us parents how happy we were that you did this for us and for our kids. And I was really touched. I cried a lot throughout this whole experience. And there's a big part of my story that I neglected to say. I had not cried this way since my father died when I was 19 years old. That was the biggest part of my story that I neglected to say. My father died when I was 19. But staying here with it this time, after taking this group to Peru, we thought about trying to take other adventures and trips throughout the country, but that didn't happen. I stayed focused on trying to connect more of these West Side youth to nature. And it was a 40-hour week job. However, I worked maybe 50, 55, 60 hours a week. I was single at the time. I didn't have any children. They were my children. So whenever they needed to talk about what was troubling them, whenever they needed help buying clothes to go to prom, that's what I did. I was there. So Garfield Park Conservatory, working with these young people, really changed me, it shaped me, and it really made me acknowledge the fact that working with young people was my calling, and connecting them to nature is something that I can't let go of. However, at that time, I was not willing to label myself someone who worked, who was an environmentalist. I was not willing to say that I wouldn't say it in public that I really cared about nature. What I would say was young people need to be more involved in the outdoors, and they need to be connected to nature because of how it makes them feel, how it makes them relax. And so my question for you to think about before I head, to the next story is, at this point in your life, are you really clear on what your calling is? And if you are, what is your tool to implement your calling? My tool right now is outdoor, is nature, is plants. And my calling is working with young people. And I'm definitely proud to say that I'm a Black man working in the environmental field. And I love being in the outdoors. And I love making sure that all our wonderful young people have that connection to nature. when I was starting to leave Garfield Park Conservatory, I wanted a new opportunity. I wanted to grow. I felt like what I did for that community and with those young people, I felt like, it ran its course and that I would still be connected with Garfield Park Conservatory. And so I applied for a position with the Jane Goodall Institute. And for those of you that don't know, Dr. Jane Goodall, really wonderful person. She's world-renowned primatologist, United Nations Ambassador of Peace. She travels over 300 days out of the year. And within the pandemic, probably Zooms just as much. So her schedule is really jam-packed these days. But when I was with the Jane Goodall Institute, worked with them for 4 years, my responsibility was to start Roots and Shoots groups throughout Illinois. And I start and manage Roots and Shoots groups throughout Illinois. And Roots and Shoots groups were young people who did service learning campaigns and projects that shows the care for people, animal, and the environment. And the young people that did the Roots and Shoots program, they were not all African-American youth. It was a wide range of young people from all ethnicities. And in addition to that, whenever Jane came to the Midwest, our small team of 3 people, we would set up all of her book signings. We would do all the speaking engagements. And when I took the job at the Jane Goodall Institute, I told Garfield Park, I said, you know what? I would try to see if I can bring Jane to the west side of Chicago, to Garfield Park. And we did. She came. She loved the place. They loved her. It was an amazing experience. I took a lot of pride in working with my youth regional council because these young people, they were really sharp. They were already environmentally minded. And they were really campaign focused and driven. And one of my best experience with the Jane Goodall Institute, we had a global summit where we flew in young people from Tanzania, Australia, China, all the different countries where there were Roots and Shoots groups. And we were at Disney World in Florida. And that's where I did a lot of my training and workshops. Theater was my main focus with them. We did a lot of improv and theater games that they loved. And I loved it too. I really enjoyed it. And then it was my 4th year with the Institute. They were having some financial challenges and they laid off 22% of the staff roughly. And as I joked when I was laid off, I said, I made the cut. I thought that was funny. I thought it was funny at the time. I think one person thought it was funny. So I was laid off. And after that, Jane and I, we spoke and we said, hey, let's still be in touch. Let's still talk and stay connected. And we did. I thought it was Hollywood talk at first. I was like, oh, that's just Hollywood talk. But what I do want to say too, though, is that when I started working with the organization, I really didn't know who Dr. Jane was. I didn't really learn about her in school. And everyone else who was working with the organization and everyone who encountered her knew who she was. And so when I first met Jane, I kept my distance. I was like, man, everybody's around her. Why? I've been reading up on her. I know about the work that she was doing, but she's just a human being like all of us, but she's wonderful. And so one time they said, the first time I was going to meet her, they said, hey, Jane's going to come and have breakfast with us. And so we were at the Sierra Club. So everyone went into the Sierra Club and they're sitting around the table with Jane and they're like, Cree, why are you sitting off on the side? Don't you want to come sit at the table with Jane? I was like, I can see her from here. It's all right. And then eventually, the people that work with her, they said, well, Cree, we'll sit on the side with you then. I was like, okay, cool, great. And then there was a moment when I did approach Jane finally, and she was in the middle of a room by herself, and everybody was there, but she was just by herself. And I went to her and I said, "Hey," I don't know, I just cracked some corny joke. "Hey, are you feeling lonely right now?" Or something real lame. And so she joked back with me. And from there, I felt comfortable talking with her. And yeah, we've just been fine. And so leaving the Jane Goodall Institute and working with these amazing young people taught me, it really encouraged me more to continue my work with youth, and that I didn't necessarily have to stay within my city. I can work with youth globally and nationally. And it was really helpful for me that I had actually took that trip to Peru to continue to understand that there's a world outside of the neighborhood and the upbringing that I came from. And this last photo over here, I think this is 2009, 2018. She called me up because she was in Chicago and she was having a real small birthday party, and they invited me out. So I thought that was really nice to be invited. And she says, "Korea, I want you to sit next to me." And I was like, "Oh, shucks. Okay, I'll do it." Uh, so it's great. I love the organization. They do amazing work. Feel free to go to their website, donate if you want to. I see there's 10 people, some comments in the chats. I have no idea what they're saying. So I'll keep going. So when the Jane Goodall Institute laid me off, one of the things that I would tell people is that I really love working with young people. They're my medicine. That's what makes me happy, And now I'm not working with youth. I'm doing contract work. What do I do? How do I get that fixed? And so I started looking for contract work where I could work with youth and do youth development, lead youth development workshops. And Garfield Park Conservatory was good enough to hire me back on as a consultant to run their teen program, because it didn't seem like they found anyone else who can work with them the way that I did. And then another organization in our South Shore community in Chicago hired me to lead a peace building workshop, a violence prevention workshop with their youth. So I said, okay, great, I'll do this. And I'm still working with young people. And then it wasn't until after that, level 4, right during this period before I found the job, a friend of mine who I worked with when I was 19 years old, I think I mentioned his name earlier, Jamie Calvin, who was the one who was leading the charge with the community gardens back when I was 19. He said, Cree, I have a friend who works at Sun-Times paper. Her name is Dawn Turner. She actually just wrote a book about Bronzeville. Look up the name Dawn Turner, dropping the plug. He said, I have a friend named Dawn Turner. She can write a story about you or people you should know in the paper. And she did. And you know what? When I read what she interviewed me, I read what she wrote. It put my whole life into perspective, because at that point in my life, I still didn't have, not that you have to have a degree to be successful and to do things, but I still did not have a college degree, because neither one of my parents had a high school degree. So I really didn't have that support or being pushed to education. But it wasn't until I started working with so this article came out. It was The Man Breaks Out the Box he grew up in. It was a really touching story for me to see my life being put in writing. And it really made me think more about where I need to go. And I wanted to get back into school because the bulk of my job has been telling young people and pushing young people to go to school, get your education, go into this field. And I was not leading by example. I did not have my degree. I was not walking the talk. And that's something that Jane Goodall does very well, is that, and that's one of the things I love about her too, is that she definitely walks the talk. And I needed to start walking the talk. So I focused on getting my education, finished my undergrad at DePaul University, and I started working at the Forest Preserve of Cook County. And now I'm going to confess something. By the time I made it to level 5, I took the job at the Forest Preserve of Cook County because I said, I know that working with young people is my calling, and connecting them to nature is something that I do, but I want to transition and just connect people to nature. I don't want to work with teens or youth anymore. I'm done with that part of my life. I'm much older now. And they hired me on. There was nothing in the job description that talked about working with teens. And then they said to me, yeah, we've been talking about starting this teen program, and we we really want you to help us run it. And I just started laughing. I said, you know what? I don't have a problem with that. I love working with young people. I did take this job to get away from that, but God was not ready for me to leave that behind. And I'm not a religious person. I don't go to church, but I do believe that there's a higher being. And I do believe that working with young people is my calling, despite how I try to get away from that. But working with the Forest Preserve of Cook County has definitely continued to push me to embrace the fact that I am in this field. I am a Black man in the conservation field. I do love nature. I love the environment. And I focus on modeling good behavior for the young people that I do work with. And I eventually decided that I wanted to go on to get my master's in biology from Miami University, Ohio, a part of the advanced inquiry program. And that a lot of the things that I learned through AIP, I use in my job and in my work. So I can honestly say that if it wasn't for my love of youth and using the natural world as my tool, I don't have an idea where I would be today if I would be doing this presentation. And the biggest thing for me right now is that now at my age, I have a 4.5-year-old that I get to take outdoors all the time, not just for work. In my personal time, I get to expose them to nature and to people in that field at a much younger age than I ever did. Some people, when they, depending on their childhood, they tend to take their childhood, and when they grow up, it leaves a negative impact on them. I took my childhood to teach me how I don't want my future to be, or how different I want my child to be, and how I want them to grow. So my son loves the outdoors. He loves the nature. He loves, I'm a parent, so I have like 4,000 photos of him doing different things. But he, every day, our routine, he goes outside. Even when it's cold, we take our walk. We look at different types of plants, flowers, playing in the snow, everything. So because of him now, he's my pride and joy. I'm always going to feel the connection to nature. I'm always going to be an advocate. At this point, so I didn't talk much about my sketch comedy and improv, but I can answer any questions if you have about that. I focused this presentation primarily on connecting young people to the outdoors and to nature. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take them now. And I will stop screen share if I can. At one point, it's very soon. There we go. All right. So I can't hear anything. Okay, I see thumbs up. All right. So if there are any questions, I will ask someone to ask them for me. Okay, I'm going to look at some faces now and names because I wasn't looking at everyone.
Jesse's going to help you to kind of moderate some of the questions, if that's okay.
All right, I'm fine with that. Let's go.
Awesome. So kind of monitor the chat while you're going. Most of it, there weren't any questions in the chat. It was all just positive comments, encouragement, talk about how inspiring everything was. I do recommend you look through them. There's some great comments for you in there. I have a question. I guess it's kind of a two-part question. So I wanted to ask you kind of how you go about encouraging people, whether that's people you work with or just people you know that don't feel safe in nature to feel safe in nature. And then the second part of that question is, so I work for a state park. Do you think there's anything that like places like a park, their staff can do to make those places feel safer or to make those people feel potentially safer in our environment?
I think I remember the questions that you asked. I think they were all about feeling safe in the outdoors and in the parks, right?
Yeah.
For me, I think that in order to make someone feel safe, you really have to know why they don't feel safe. That's the first thing. But I think that what parks can do to make people feel safe, if you don't know why they don't feel safe, make sure there's, and this may or may not answer your question, make sure there's appropriate signage in those areas so people don't feel like they're going to get lost. Make sure that there should be some official staff person always around in that area so that people who are hiking or running or jogging do feel that form of safety. Make sure, and in a resource management kind of aspect, make sure that you're doing a proper maintenance in those parks or preserves. Make sure like the, invasive plants are removed. Make sure people can be seen while walking through these different parks or preserves. Is that sort of answering your question?
Yeah.
What was the first question that you asked?
Was just kind of like advice or what like things, words of encouragement you can kind of, talk to people about that don't feel safe. So that's kind of more from like a personal standpoint.
The other thing, what I would tell someone is to, and this is with anything, quite honestly, before you go to a location, a park or preserve, look it up, learn about it, know what the amenities are there. To do your due diligence to it's just usual street things too that you can apply to a forest preserve. Like you can go in a forest preserve or a park and listen to headphones or music, but always be aware of your surroundings. Not that you're worried about anything happening to you, but it's just, you should always just be aware of your surroundings and bring someone with you, because it is enjoyable to do things with someone else. And go during the daytime when you're going out, but just mentally just tell yourself that I am safe. I'm here to enjoy nature. I'm here to be one with the plants. And just keep your mind focused on that versus what could happen to you. Because now you just waste, this sounds really direct, but I feel like you're just wasting your time being nervous about something negative happening to you in the outdoors and in nature. Go for the enjoyment and focus on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I have to admit something, I'm tired. So I'm going to try to focus and answer the questions.
I have a question. You said that you did stand up, right? Comedy?
I did sketch. I studied at Second City for 2 years, and then went on to do a lot of sketch comedy and improv with 2 groups that were co-formed together, and we traveled around doing that stuff. And I did take one stand-up comedy class. No, that's not true. I took a stand-up comedy class at Second City as well last year or 2 years ago. And yeah, I did that.
Were there any experiences in nature that you brought up during your comedy class?
That is a great question. And the answer is no. And I say it that way because in both situations with sketch comedy, you know, you're writing out what you want to do on stage, and stand up, you write out different types of jokes that you might want to do. And I've done that for both, but none of them actually made it to the stage. And the one about the joke I was gonna, I'm just gonna tell you the premise of the joke because I didn't complete it. I was gonna tell a joke about how it was something about invasive plants, you know, plants that were invasive, or plants that don't belong, you know, in the forest reserve. It was going to be a joke around that, and that's probably why I never made it, because I just couldn't quite make it work. No, but I love that you asked that question, because now I want to try to make that happen, to do it, because I think I can pull it off now.
I think there's so much material with people who have not experienced nature going into nature for the first time and wondering what their experience is and what's happening to them. I've done that to my cousin. I took her camping for the first time and it was a nightmare. She did not like it at all. City kid, never experienced it. So I was like, oh, probably has to have a joke about that.
And I mean, there's tons of jokes about mosquitoes being the only thing that people don't like about the outdoors, but everything else is fine.
Mm.
No, thank you for that. I don't know if you have a way to reach out to me, but I would love to talk to you some more about that.
Yeah, I have stories.
What about the other ways around? Did your skills for improvising in a stage setting ever help you bring levity or improvising in a nature setting? You know what? If I understand that question, I when I do programs with the Forest Preserve, I use improv and storytelling. I didn't really mention that I really enjoy telling stories. That's something that I think I do very well. I use improv and storytelling to connect people to nature. I did it a lot at Garfield Park Conservatory. That's one of the things that I did very well there, and why I got tons of thank you letters from teachers and organizations about how I connected those youth to the plants there. And I didn't do it in an academic way. I didn't talk over their heads. I talked very simple to them so that they can understand the adaptation of plants and how it's related to their clothes and so forth. And I did it in a fun and storytelling way. This is the only way I could respect Creed, was through his jokes. Oh, Ronnie. Okay. I'll let someone read the chat. Is there any other questions? Is there a way that programs like Turn a Lot Around, hey, Sonny, and Robert Taylor could be created again for kids in urban areas? So that's from Sonny Fisher, who is a mentor of mine. Known her since I was 19 years old. She was one of those people working out there at the community garden. And Turn a Lot Around was the program where we put together the community gardens. And the question is there a way that it could be duplicated in other urban areas? I'm sure it can be. I'm sure it can be. You just have to have the right people leading that charge to make it happen. And it might actually be happening in other places that I'm unaware of. I think, yeah, I'll be making stuff up, but I think there is a location that kind of does something like that, but it's not by, yeah, it should be it can be duplicated. Are there any questions? All right.
There was a comment. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I had a question for you, Creed. Hi. First of all, thanks. This has been wonderful. What a story and what a life. I think my main question was about I was thinking about the neighborhood where you grew up and the community where you grew up. And I was just wondering if you felt like it's changed since when you were young. And if so, has it been like in terms of people's relationship with each other or with nature or whatever you feel is it different? And if it is different, is it different in a good way? or how, what do you think?
First of all, hey, you guys, Thailand group. Well, the Bronzeville area, well, especially where Robert Taylor Homes, where that used to be, it's all torn down. It's all torn down, and most of, I believe, and I rarely drive through that area, but I think it's just all grassy. It's all grass field. I do not know what's happening with that land. I do not know I don't know what's happening with the land. Outside of that, I know the local high schools and the elementary schools are still in the area. I don't know how they're doing. However, Beethoven School, which is still on the grounds, I did go back there a couple of times, and I did bring them to two of my current jobs. I brought them out to Garfield Park Conservatory and to the Forest Reserve of Cook County. So I was able to go back and say, I'm an alum of this elementary school. And it was great. It was really great. It was nice to do that. But the area has definitely changed because it's not there anymore, really. And you know what? And quite honestly, before the buildings were torn down, and no one could understand why I would say this, but I would often say, I would love to bring my son back here and look at these buildings and say, this is where your father came from. You know, this is my background. I can't do that with him now because it's like, Dad, you came from a field of grass. It's like, yeah. I don't know if I answered your question, but thank you for that.
Yeah, sure. And if actually, since I had another question, if I can sneak one in. I was wondering about your son and what you felt like he got out of nature the most, since you mentioned it.
Yeah, I never really asked him, like, what do you like about it? I do know that he loves bright colors and flowers. He loved pretending to be not a naturalist, but someone who walks around, a park ranger. He likes to be a park ranger. He loves, not that he's articulating this, but he loves connecting with trees. I have a ton of photos with him embracing trees, staring down the trees, and he definitely pays close attention to ants. He likes to follow them, especially when they're in their large groups. And now he's taken a liking to squirrels. So he really enjoys being outdoors. He really does.
Great.
And he loves coming to the forest reserves. So I can't wait to look at the comments when we're done. Any other questions for me? So I don't know if there are, but there's a story that I wanted to share that has really motivated me. And it didn't make it in because I was on my soapbox. There was a young lady who, at the Forest Preserve of Cook County, there was a young lady who worked there. She's the type of young lady who has long fingernails. She likes to get dolled up and dressed up. And this is how she says it. I like to get dolled up. I like to get dressed up. And she started working with us. And she had no connection to nature, didn't really go out and do all that stuff. And we said, well, you're working with us now. What we want you to do is to take this little bowl saw, and we want you to help make a wooden sled out of buckthorn, which is an invasive plant. And so she's like, really? Like, yeah, really. So she used the saw. She followed all the instructions and she made a little, I think, a boat out of this buckthorn. That was her first time really, touching plants or doing anything related to nature. Now she's 16 at the time. Now at the age of 23, this young lady has gotten certified to do prescribed burns. She knows how to lead a crew to do invasive plant removal. She has worked as a CEP aide with the Forest Reserve, meaning that she's doing all these environmental programs. And she does hair, right? And so I would joke with her how I say, I'm so impressed with you, how you've gone from doing people's hair to doing nature's hair. And she's an amazing and wonderful person. And when she does her presentations for us, she talks about how she never thought that she would be doing the work that she's doing, being a part of Friends of the Forest Reserve at one point, being certified to do herbicide, to remove weeds and stuff. It's just amazing the things that you can when you expose youth to the outdoors and to nature, how it changes their life. And in the beginning, they don't think about it. I mean, I never thought about it. I never thought that working on a community garden would get me to this point.
We did have another question come in through the chat.
Okay.
Kristen asked, as you worked with our beloved teens, what were some key moments or signs when you noticed that you left an everlasting positive impact on them?
What were some key signs or key moments? I think some of my big moments was when some of them would just tell me that, I'm no longer afraid of this anymore. I don't know why for some reason I'm starting to get emotional, but just for them to say, I used to be afraid to go into this area because of the mosquitoes, because of the little critters that I'm seeing, but now I see that they're harmless. And, and having pictures of them holding a little worm in their hand is a really big moment for me when they've never done that before in their life. Moments of them just saying in the beginning of starting to work with us, I'm nervous, I'm scared to do this. And then at the end of the program, they're like, wow, I really need to get more people involved. I need to go back and I need to tell my family about this. And I admit, not to get on my soapbox, but I just recently admitted something to myself. Someone told me the other day how working with me in the outdoors kept them off the streets, kept them from doing, stuff. And it was news for me that that's what I did, because at the time, I never saw myself keeping young people off the streets. I saw myself, being there for my children, teaching them, working with them. Never saw them as bad, never saw them as you're in trouble, never saw them as endangered. I saw them as people. I saw them as family. I said, let's go have fun, let's learn together, let's be together. And not once did I think that, oh, I'm saving your life, I'm taking you off the streets. I just didn't see it that way. So I would get moments like that, and I would hear young people say that. And unfortunately, I tend to brush it off. I'm like, I don't want to hear that I saved your life or anything. Tell me in a different way, because my intention isn't to save your life. My intention is to expose you to something amazing, because, it helped me out too. Holding tarantula snakes, all types of stuff. I didn't see who that was from.
That was from Ronnie. You're going to see a lot of great stuff in the chat, so we're definitely going to download that for you to share it. And I feel like everyone does not want this to end, but I guess I'm going to be the smiling bad cop, as I've been in
Okay.
other forums, to just kind of end us here. But Cree, this is better than we could have ever imagined. So let's take a minute and just be thankful, and feel free to turn on your voice, and let's give a big round of applause for Cree. Lots of love. Awesome on so many levels.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for listening and calling in. And I didn't say this in the beginning, but thank you for allowing me to be transparent, vulnerable, open, and to share my story with you.
That's excellent. It's the stories we need to hear more of, and we're just really appreciative, I think, to be part of yours tonight. So thank you for that. For those of you that are just, Lizzie mentioned this was her first cafe, so yay. I hope some of you guys can come back for future cafes, and the ones that have been recorded are on Dragonfly's webpage. So check those out, because Cree, the first thing I thought about was, and I wrote this to Gabby, you need to talk to Tanner, yes, because he gave an awesome talk, and you guys had a lot of great parallels about youth, and I hope that's some of the connections, the intention here is we can make some of those connections from what we're doing tonight. So thank you all for coming. Cree, thanks again, and have a good evening, everyone. Good night.
No, thank you all.